Let's talk about hypervigilance and how you get out of it. How do we end the hypervigilance? If you have CPTSD, likely you also have hypervigilance or you're a hypervigilant person. To be hypervigilant, it means you're in a constant heightened state of watching and awareness and fear that something is going to go wrong. In your perception, in your surroundings, you're feeling jumpy, and it's all a trauma response. It's a coping mechanism to help you to feel alert in order to avoid danger, in order to avoid someone hurting you, in order to avoid being harmed or neglected or abused or abandoned. And where does this come from? Well, obviously, if you grow up in a household where parents are punishing, harsh, abusive, neglecting, abandoning, then it leads a child to try to figure out, how am I going to survive in this unpredictable environment? And so what do you think a child's going to come up with? Well, if I always watch, if I always assume the worst, then I'll be safe from being hit with an unexpected pain, because a pain that's expected is easier to cope with than an unexpected pain. So these children are constantly watching their parents' every move, the parents' facial expressions, the parents, the way they sit, the way they shift, so that they're ready in case that parent is going to explode or is going to hurt them again. So these people go into life with this hypervigilance, and they learn to just be this way. With their future partners, they're always expecting the worst, fearing the worst, that the partner's going to cheat, or that the partner doesn't like them or is mad. If the partner shows any emotion, they may immediately become dysregulated just to see the partner get a little bit emotional, because where they grew up, hey, if mom or dad got emotional, that could mean some of the worst pain. So this is how they keep themselves safe, being hyper vigilant. On the surface, it may seem to kind of make sense. Hey, if you don't want to get hurt again, keep on the watch. Watch out. Assume the worst. If people have betrayed you, then don't trust anyone anymore. But if you want to get out of hypervigilance, then you're going to need to do the work. What's the work? In this case, the work is changing the beliefs. Changing the beliefs. What's the problem with the beliefs here? Analyze it for a moment. Does it really keep us safer to constantly be overwhelmed and exhausted, expecting the worst, trusting no one, feeling tense muscles, a rapid heartbeat? Does it actually keep us safer to be constantly fearful and hypervigilant? What do you think? Give it some thought. It's important that we challenge those old beliefs, because the old beliefs may have been, hey, this is how I stay safe. I don't want to get hurt again. Getting hurt is the worst thing in the world. I can't take the pain. But all of that is learned helplessness. I can't take the pain. It's living in fear. But if we're to move forward, living in purpose and love, then it means we have to expose ourselves to risk. In order to accomplish any goal, you will have to expose yourself to risk. Even if you just wanted to go to the grocery store, you have to expose yourself to risk, don't you? If you put your money in a bank, you're exposing yourself to risk, and you're trusting someone, aren't you? So is the policy, I never trust anyone, or I'll never take a risk, is that policy really the best? Does it really keep you safer? Well, imagine a life of not being able to go to the grocery store. Imagine a life of not being able to put your money in a bank. So then what do? Hide it under your mattress? Bury it in your backyard? Is it really safe there? Is it easy to access if you're traveling? No, it is not safe putting all of your money in your house, and it is not accessible. So now you've impaired yourself in your life. By doing what you thought was going to help you, you've actually hindered yourself. So give this some thought. Is hypervigilance really helping us? Or is it actually hindering us? What do you think? Is hypervigilance actually hindering you? The fact of the matter is, we are actually safer and better off trusting and being optimistic rather than living in fear, distrust, and pessimism. Do you know what catastrophizing is? That's where you're constantly thinking about the worst case scenario in any situation. So if your kid doesn't come home, you think they've been abducted. It's always the worst possible thing that could happen is what you're imagining. If you live in a state of catastrophe mentally, then you're creating that mental environment for the energy of the mind and body, so that your body is actually living through that crisis or through that trauma again and again, all day, every day. When you're hypervigilant, this is a 24/7 assumption that you are not safe. Now, how do you think the body responds to not being safe? Well, it's dumping chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol to warn you. But then that's driving up your anxiety, your depression, and it negatively impacts your health. If your body feels unsafe 24/7, you are allowing your system to get dysregulated and to stay in dysregulation. You, the conscious being, are allowing this. It is a choice to live in hypervigilance. So you need to now make the choice to live in optimism and trust. Well, but won't I get hurt again? Won't you get hurt again even when you live in hypervigilance? It's time to change your beliefs. Old belief: if I keep on the watch and I'm hypervigilant and always assume the worst and trust no one, I'll stay safe. New belief: not trusting and living in fear does not keep me safe. Actually, I'm safer if I'm generally optimistic and trusting. Like a person who goes ahead and puts their money in the bank, they're actually more protected generally. They're going to have more ease of life than someone who says, I can't trust banks, so I'm going to bury my money. They're going to hinder themselves. Does that make sense? What's the evidence for this new belief? That it's better to trust and be optimistic. Sounds scary, right? Remember, the old way is not actually keeping you from getting hurt. It just makes you have to live in the hurt all day, every day. So you're living in constant pain, constant stress. With the new way of thinking, you get to live your life in joy, happiness, peace, prosperity, love, abundance, connection. Why? Because you're trusting and you're loving. Because you're connecting. Because you're optimistic. Meaning that you're maintaining hope for the best case scenario. Well, isn't that stupid? Since things do go wrong? No, it's intelligent. It's intelligent to maintain hope for the best case scenario. Why? Because of what it does for you. Examine the evidence that supports this new belief. What will happen to your mental health if you are always thinking in the positive, if you are being optimistic, if you are trusting? Your well-being will be better. You'll have less anxiety because you're not living in the constant catastrophe, right? You'll have better coping mechanisms, right? So when something does go wrong, the pessimistic person, the hypervigilant person says, I knew it. It always goes bad. And then they what do? They double down on their old maladaptive behavior. Now I really can't trust anyone. Now I really can't trust. Did it help originally to not trust? No, you just got hurt again. Look at what happens when the non-hypervigilant, but the balanced person who who leans towards optimism, look at how they respond when something goes wrong. Oh no, that wasn't what I hoped for. I'm disappointed. Well, that's okay because I have optimistic viewpoint B and C to lean on. Hopefully, we will be able to fix this and restore things. Things will get better again. I still have this. I still have that. I still can do this. I still can do that. Look at how resilient this person is able to be because they live in a state of optimism and trust. They bounce back quicker from setback, whereas the other person says, I'm not bouncing back. I'm staying here on the ground. So they become like the figurative runner that trips and falls but never gets back up. And they just stay laying there while everyone's running past them. In order to be resilient, we have to be able to get back up. The only reason we would get back up is if we had some type of hope. The only way we have hope is if we're living in a state of optimism, in a state of trust. So we have better well-being, less negativity, less anxiety, less depression. If we're keeping a mindset of optimism, hope, we're more in peace. What about in other areas of your life? Think about your social connections in your social life. If you're trusting and optimistic, then you're open to forming connections with more people, which means you'll naturally meet more good people because you're meeting more people and connecting to more people anyway. If you don't trust anyone, then even a good person you won't trust. And so you will lose your relationships with good people because good people don't like not being trusted. And you will have less connection as a result, less genuine relationships as a result. Why? Well, do people really want to be around a pessimist? Do people really want to be around someone who assumes the worst about them? Someone who thinks of them in a negative light? No. So the very thing you fear, which is to be abandoned, you are making a certainty by living in hypervigilance. It's time to change our beliefs, right? So let's choose to be optimistic, to be trusting. Why? Again, it opens us up for more connections. We have better well-being. If we're hypervigilant and in fear, we can't form trusting relationships. Then we're isolated. Then we feel more loneliness. What about our decision-making? When we're constantly preoccupied with potential threats, we cannot think clearly. We cannot make decisions clearly. When you're constantly preoccupied with potential threats, all of your decisions are just fear-based. And no matter which way you go, there's always something to fear. So then you're paralyzed. You feel stuck. You're not a good decision maker when you live in fear. But when you live in purpose, you're guided by your objectives in life. Then you're able to make decisions very clearly because you're aligned. And so if something doesn't align with your purpose, then you know it's not a good decision to make. It's not whether or not there's a potential threat. It's not whether or not something could go wrong. It's what is aligned with my purpose. Because someone who has purpose would rather face the catastrophe that comes along with living according to what they believe. They will face even going to jail for what they believe in, and they will be happy. Because it's not the outward circumstance or what happens to them. It is if you're making your reality line up with your inner values. And a person who lives according to purpose and optimism is empowered to do that. Someone who just lives in fear, they're a squirrel. They're just an animal. Just intuition, instincts. I'm scared. You ever see a squirrel try to cross the street? Oh, whoa. He's this way, he's that way, he's this way, he's that way. The next thing you know, you basically ran over him. You didn't want to, but he never picked a direction. That's how we become when we live in constant fear, impulsive, avoidant. That's detrimental to our ability to make good decisions. What about physical health? Well, when you're hypervigilant, your health goes down. You got more cortisol going in the system. Cortisol makes us unhappy. It makes us fat. Cortisol hurts our immune system. Too much cortisol is poisonous to our system. So what do we need to do? We need to slow down the production of adrenaline and cortisol. Our meditation needs to be with the vision of the future, in optimism. Vision of the future, optimism. I want to be here. I want to do this. I believe in myself. I can do this. I can have this. All right? What about the reality we create? Do we have more opportunities when we're hypervigilant? No. We shut down all opportunities because we're not going to be safe. We're scared. When you're hypervigilant, you can get a promotion and see that as a bad thing. You can get a girlfriend, boyfriend, a husband, wife. It could be your dream man. You see it as a bad thing. Well, I'm scared. I can't open myself up to love. I can't allow myself to be hurt. Right? But what if I lose them? So you're not open to love. So all of your dreams in life cannot be fulfilled. In fact, you're never dreaming anyway, because you live in a state of a nightmare. You live in the nightmare because you're staying in hypervigilance. So it limits your ability to take risks, which limits your opportunities in life. Does it make sense? We're creating our reality to a degree, right? Everything that happens to us is not in our control, but some of it is. So when you are in hypervigilance, in a state of constant negativity and catastrophe, then what reality do you create for yourself? You walk out of your house. You walk out of your house, and what do you see? All the bad. You see all the worst case scenarios, everything that could go wrong. But when you're living in a state of optimism, in a state of you're guided by purpose, what do you see when you walk out of the house? You see opportunities. When you see opportunities, then, well, that's what an opportunity is. It's a chance to improve your situation in life. So who's going to have a better situation in life? Yes, the person who's trusting and optimistic, who doesn't live in hypervigilance. So they're creating a better reality. How do people feel about you when you're optimistic? They like you. They like being around you. How do people feel about you when you're pessimistic, hypervigilant? Well, they don't feel like they can trust you either because you don't trust anybody. You don't trust them. There's no connections formed. This is making sense? So let me give you an example. Think about Greg. Greg has a girlfriend, and she is beautiful. I mean, this is, aesthetically, this is the girl of Greg's dreams. This is the woman he has always wanted. The problem is, well, she's beautiful. So Greg is really worried that his girlfriend's going to cheat on him. Maybe someone cheated on Greg in the past. But whatever the case, this worry really gets the best of Greg. So what does Greg start to do? Well, he starts to behave in a hypervigilant manner. He's always suspicious of his girlfriend. Where were you? How do I know there wasn't a guy there? He's always accusing her of cheating. He feels like that's going to keep him safe. Well, I don't want to be made the fool. And so Greg is, you're cheating on me. I know you are. I know you're probably talking to some guys. I'm sure there's some guys. He's really scared. His girlfriend's beautiful. He feels like his girlfriend could cheat on him. But the way he's dealing with this is constantly accusing her of cheating, constantly telling her that he's not trusting, constantly saying that he thinks it's happening. What is his girlfriend going to do eventually? I asked that question to my client. My client said she's more likely to cheat on him. Ding, ding. He's creating his worst fear. He is making it a certainty with his behavior. And he's behaving that way because of his way of thinking. And his way of thinking is negativity, hypervigilance. And that's based on the old belief that he's keeping himself safer by expecting the worst. So then when it happens, he says to himself, I was right. I knew she was going to cheat. But maybe he was actually wrong. Because if he would have just shown up and enjoyed his time with his girlfriend and had connection and been himself and been relaxed and been open and been vulnerable, to the potential of what could happen, he could have had more positive interactions. And there is no better predictor of long-term success of a relationship than more positive interactions. And so they may have made it. They may have been able to really have a long-lasting, healthy relationship. And even if she cheated in the end, he would have had so many good times and good memories. As a result of having the positive bias, he would have enjoyed his life more. And she would have enjoyed the relationship more too. In fact, maybe then she would have been even more likely to apologize and to look to reconcile because she actually enjoyed the relationship. So did Greg make his life better by being hypervigilant? No. And you won't either. So choose to live according to purpose. Choose to live in optimism. Choose to trust. Will it protect you from getting hurt again? Things will go wrong. Accept that that is a part of life. It doesn't mean we're never cautious, but we'll take calculated risks at times, understanding that it could go wrong, but knowing that we'll do better in the end and be able to cope better if we're not living in a constant state of crisis. So let us not choose hypervigilance. Hypervigilance.